Okay, October 28th, 2025, on the heels of our 3-hour study session. We're just getting warmed up. The Town of Estes Park Board meeting is now in session. Anyone who wants to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with us may do so.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on to the agenda approval. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda as written? I see none. I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Trustee Eigel moved to approve the agenda as written. Trustee Youngland seconded. We can vote. Agenda approved unanimously as written. We'll move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. And we please ask that any public comments on quasi-judicial items be reserved for the appropriate public hearing. Does any member of the public wish to speak on a non-agenda item? And I see hands moving. I'm going to try my cool little new timer. And
I can see it.
we're going to see how that works. I want the speaker to be able to look at that. And I want Travis to also signal when we're down to 2 minutes, down to 1 minute, and when time's up. And there we go. So first speaker may approach. This is not a question and answer, not a discussion item. It was just purely an opportunity to address the board. Name, address, and 3 minutes.
My name's John Guffey, and I live at 561 Chapin Lane here in town. And I'm bringing a concern that I learned a little more about in this beautiful copy of the Bugle, which I read today in the foyer. And it's regarding the essential need for a new law enforcement building. And I'm wishing to speak against the very idea of needing to grow our infrastructure, and particularly if it would be to take up land that is currently used as playground space for children at our school. And after reading the content of what is described as progress in policing, I greatly respect our officers and all those who conduct law enforcement in our community, and I believe it's done well, and I'm respectful of everything that's going on in this building regarding that. And I think this building accomplishes all that is needed. The parking situation is a problem. I don't know why we have so many police vehicles. They sit in there all day long. Maybe they drive them, I don't know, but it's not a big city. They could travel in many ways, and a lot of the work is done over the phone. I mean, to me, the idea of growing is the anathema to who we are. As Estes Park, as a community living on this precious land, trying to preserve it and maintain law and order, and also justice and dignity and peace, I think we need to review very carefully this idea that we need to grow bigger. A bigger building, newer things, better way to move people who have been arrested into the building, not a problem. We don't need fencing. We don't need this containment where the person who has been arrested needs to be shielded from observation. Let them walk into the building. Don't expect them to fight or need to be contained at every moment. And also, we have rooms in this building where the police force can meet as a group and have meetings and sessions. I don't see the need for a new building that would demand a great deal of you-know-what, not only land, but building structure. And the demand is, I think, off base. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed. Was that a hand motion? And, you know, you got to be careful out there, Ben. It's like doing an auction or something. 1,500, 2,000. Yeah, right. Okay. We'll move on to town board comments and liaison reports. Trustee Eigel.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a trustee talk here in this room recently, and it was, it's the only thing I have to report on. It was an interesting trustee talk. It was more of a trustees will listen to whatever you have to say. And I did more listening at that trustee talk than I have before. There was some personal criticism. There was some global criticism. There was some very constructive input. Trustee Youngland and I were there with our town administrator, Mahalik. And I got a couple of emails, follow-up emails that were interesting to read. It's always interesting to see what the perspective is from someone else in the same room at the same time seeing the same thing. And it opened my eyes to a couple of opportunities that we have, and that is to try to figure out a way, because I've been in the shoes of constituents not feeling heard before. And I've been in the shoes of wondering, why isn't the board listening to what I have to say? And so in time, I think I'm going to have an opportunity to respond to that. Not tonight, but the trustee talk for those who have not attended, it's a pretty informal thing. You show up, there's a circle of chairs. There's a quick introduction of who you are. It allows you to see who those names and faces are that are in the community that are involved. And it's an opportunity to say anything that you want. And it's not recorded, it's not formal, but there's some very good firsthand factual information that's available directly from the town administrator or the trustees, if that's what you desire. But my sense is that people want to be heard and know that they're heard, and I had a sense they wanted to look in my eyes and know that I heard their words, and I sure did. And I appreciate that. So it's challenged me to improve on a couple of things, to look at it with a different maybe perspective. And trustee talks are invaluable to our constituents and neighbors to be involved with the process. So I want to encourage people to get involved in those. They happen once a month, I'm asking. Okay, once a month, different trustees on a rotating basis. Thank you for the opportunity.
Trustee Youngland.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the shoe in on that trustee talk. And one thing I wanted to bring up that I heard is, and I wanted to have my fellow trustees hear it, is the constituents are liking how we are starting to explain before we vote, or as we're voting, explain our position and why we're taking that position. And I know my first term as trustee, Mayor Koenig, encouraged us to do that, and I kind of forgot that. And it's easy to not do. And when I heard that they really enjoyed, whether it's the vote that they were hoping I would do or not, at least understanding where we were coming from, I think is going to be helpful. So I encourage us all to maybe try to start doing that. I had a tremendous last 2 days. I've been down in Loveland. I am the representative for Estes Park, voting on the council for the opioid abatement council in Larimer County. We had our statewide Colorado conference yesterday down in Loveland, and then today we had rethinking addiction and prevention conference. And wow, I'm just full. Very tired, but full. Great ideas. It's always good to go to those and see what the different regions, they came from clear all over Colorado, all the different opioid abatement councils come together, and Larimer County is being recognized as the lead, not just in Colorado, but across the US, for our transparency, for getting those funds out and getting the data in which we've hired a firm to help us with the data and the dashboard and all that. And we get calls all the time, hey, how are you guys doing this? But I think it really, we were fortunate that we had a lot of great nonprofits already started and committed to our county. So we didn't have to invent the wheel in a lot of aspects with that. But it's very interesting. If you want to learn more or talk about it, it's one of my passions. I'll be happy to do that. Just send me an email. We can have coffee. But I just wanted to share with the group. There's some great stuff. The numbers of deaths are going down from overdose, and we're starting to see improvement in all aspects of addiction, harm reduction, homeless, coming out of the jail system and relapsing. All those things. We put a lot of money into the housing sector. Women, expecting mothers is also been another of our focus. So we're getting ready to go around, prepare for next year's funding. It has gone down as we anticipated, but not like what we thought. We're still getting some really good funds coming through. And so as it continues, it's going to be harder because with less funds, we can't give as much. And then we have to decide, do we spend a lot here and there or little bits throughout? So anyway, I could talk all night about this, but great conferences. And I look forward to being a great representative to Estes Park. I'm always saying, what are you doing for us up here? And trying to make sure that we are at the table, our school system, our partners up here are not forgotten. And so all good things happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to speak about a couple different things. First of all, my liaison assignments. So I'm a liaison to the Board of Adjustment, which doesn't meet a whole lot. They deal with variances from things like setbacks and things like that. It is an important function of the government as a kind of a relief valve from excessively strict enforcement of ordinances when it doesn't make sense. So it's a really important position. And we have had a vacancy in that, and I really would like to encourage anyone to give that a try. If you're going to volunteer for something for government, this is probably one of the lesser burdens to take on, is to be a Board of Adjustment member, and it's a good way to get your feet wet as to what happens. And it's sort of unusual because I understand, and maybe Attorney Kramer can put some gloss on this, that certain appeals from the Board of Adjustment go directly to district court and don't even come through the town board. So there is a really a significantly larger area of authority for an appointed position than there often is. So is that right? That's right. Okay, good. So I really ask anyone that you think might be interested in some participation in government to put their name in. Really like to have public participation in that. I'm also liaison to the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is in the midst of determining how to move their office up to what's known as Skyview in Fall River Village. They pay rent currently to the U.S. Bank building, and by moving there, they would eliminate that expense and enable them to devote more of their resources to workforce and attainable housing. So that's in the process. They also kind of decided, because of limited fund availability, to reorganize and reprioritize the use of their resources. So as a result, you'll see tonight they're proceeding on the steps necessary to annex property on Riverside that is owned by the Housing Authority, but deprioritizing that as a development project because of the limited resources. And I think they're going to focus more attention on fish hatchery as a result. And that's going to be kind of a major impetus coming forward. So those are the kind of the two main things coming on as liaison reports. I'd also like to thank Trustee Youngland for your comment about knowing what the positions of town board members are. I think that's critically important. There are elections coming up, and people will want to weigh in on whether they think a particular person is an appropriate person to be speaking on behalf of the town. And I don't know how they'd know that other than through the commentary that we give at town board meetings. And in the same line, thanking the mayor for clarifying that trustee comments and liaison reports are not limited to liaison reports. You know, I don't come up here for the 3 minutes to give public comment, but I do speak from the dais to give my public comment, which is the opinion of just me as one town board member, does not represent anyone else's opinion but my own, but as a citizen and as an interested party, particularly on the issues that I've been principally addressing, which is mostly workforce housing and attainable housing. You know, you need to know where I stand on that and also why I feel the way I do about these things. So with that, I want to mention something about these citizen-initiated ordinances. There are a couple of things that I'm concerned about things that the proponents have said. I believe there's been some fear-mongering going on and also denigration of certain of our local businesses, and I'll identify what I mean by that. The fear-mongering, you'll see statements, and I know social media, you can see anything in social media, but statements such as, unless these ordinances are passed, all single-family properties in the town will be rezoned. Well, that's simply not true. That's not going to happen for a variety of reasons, and it's fear-mongering to suggest that that is the case. And to give it, remember, our existing law has a process for rezoning and for planned unit developments. It's a process designed to provide due process to all parties involved, the property owner seeking the rezoning and the neighbors. Neighbors within 500 feet are notified of public meetings with respect to rezoning. And then there is a public process in which people accountable for the decision make the decision as to whether it's rezoned. If the proposal 300 would give that power to people who are not accountable to the citizens, that is the neighbors adjoining the 500 feet. So with that intensive public process, what's happened? So there have been 3 rezonings of recent vintage proposals dealing with rezonings in residential areas. 2 of those rezoning requests were denied. The first effort on Peakview was denied, and then an effort on Highway 7 was denied, and only one of them has been approved, and that was the one on Peakview to allow for 12 single-family homes. So it wasn't even a multifamily type development. It was a single-family home development with participation by Habitat for Humanity. So to suggest that everything's going to go haywire unless we adopt these ordinances, well, we don't have these ordinances right now. And look at what's happened in this recent vintage. We've had 3 rezoning requests, 2 of which have been denied. So there's no question that the process works both to approve and deny rezoning requests, because you're going to have some of each throughout this. So don't fear-mongering. And also, there's been some denigration that those opposed to these initiatives are only businesses that are going to get rich off of these initiatives. These are provisions that have been in the law already. These are your neighbors who are running businesses, who are attempting to improve the community the best they can while still earning a living. They're not out of state, out of town, big corporations coming in here. That just doesn't happen in this town. And so to denigrate them as, just money-grubbing businesses is an insult in my mind. So remember, ballot initiative issue 300 would make a change to the current environment. It would restrict development. It would limit what can be done. And, I just don't think that that is a wise move for our voters to make, particularly by delegating essentially governmental decision-making to non-governmental actors who are not accountable to the electorate. So with that, I will get off my soapbox, and thank you for the time to talk about it.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. When it comes to voting, maybe you saw my little micro message last week. All I'll say about ballot initiatives and everything is vote, vote, vote. I want everybody to vote. The more people who vote, the better representation you get of the community mind. So everybody get out there. If only 11% of the people vote, that means 6% of the population, of the citizens, are deciding those issues. Come on, let's get 80%. Go for it. Kudos in 2 ways to Trustee Youngland, the opioid work that she's doing and that the group is doing. This is just an awesome piece of work. This goes beyond politics to humanity, a wonderful thing. Thanks for your participation in it and the progress being made. Great reminder on the explaining. As people have probably noticed, I usually, although maybe I'm making an exception at the moment, I usually try to speak less than any of the other trustees. I try to make my comments very brief, and sometimes probably make them too brief and don't even say why I'm voting yes or no on something. So good reminder. 2 other things, the Estes Arts District receiving the, I'll probably say it wrong, the Creative Colorado designation, whatever it is, it's CCD, I think it is, from the CCI. It's a wonderful thing. It gives them an opportunity to apply for other grants, but also to put that little sticker on everything. We're one of the premier arts destinations in Colorado now with that designation. Finally, I want to talk about Estes Park Health and UC Health. My involvement as they move closer and closer to finishing the deal on December 1, I have been encouraging the participants, including UC Health, to make sure that that operational board is truly, properly represented with a fresh start on that operational board so that the future doesn't necessarily resemble some of the challenges of the past. And I will continue to encourage that and hope that the proper ears are listening and assignations are made as that comes together. It's very important that that 7-person operational board is really representing our interests, and I do hope that some really good folks come out for that and are appointed to that. And with that, I'm finishing my comments, and I'll turn it over to Travis for Town Administrator comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start tonight by recognizing our Water Division crews who worked a Carriage Hills leak starting on Saturday at 1:50 p.m. and wrapping up the leak fix and not the restoration at 4:30 a.m. on Sunday. It was a minor leak in terms of impact on the system, but you can't let water leaks go. I want to thank those crews for working through the night and then later that day to finish restoration efforts on the disturbed area. Those are the unseen work that goes into maintaining our water distribution system and ensuring everybody in our community has access to healthy and clean water every time they turn on the tap. Secondly, it is my last policy governance monitoring report of the year. It's policy 3.3, which is financial planning and budgeting. That policy states that with respect for strategic planning for projects, services, and activities with a fiscal impact, the town administrator may not jeopardize either the operational or fiscal integrity of town government. And I'm pleased to report that full compliance in that area. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Seeing none, we'll move forward to the consent agenda, and thank you, Travis. I will read the consent agenda into the record in full. You might see it on the screen also. Item 1, expenditure approval list, bills. There it is. Item 2, town board meeting and study session minutes dated October 14th, 2025. Item 3, joint town board and Larimer County Commissioners study session minutes dated October 15th, 2025. Item 4, town board's budget study session minutes dated September 18th and October 3rd, 2025. Item 5, Resolution 9225, which is the 2026 Annual 6E Funding Plan. Item 6, Revised Policy 208, naming of town-owned parks, open spaces, and facilities. And item 7, acceptance of Town Administrator Policy Governance Monitoring Report, which there we go. Those are the 7 items on there. Does any member of the public, including the town board, request to have an item removed from the consent agenda?
I'd request item 5 be removed from the consent agenda.
Okay. And any other changes? If not, I'll request a motion with that change for approval of the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda after removing item 5.
Second?
Trustee Eigel moved to approve the consent agenda minus item 5, and Trustee Youngland seconded. We can vote. Consent agenda with the modification approved. We can now move to item 5, Resolution 9225, 2026 Annual 6E Funding Plan. Trustee Brown.
I don't want to go over the whole thing again. That's not the purpose of removing it. My purpose of removing it is I've been following the development of our 6E funding plan since its initiation when we passed it into law in what was 2022 now. And it's been remarkable to me to see the development of this within our community, with the Housing Authority, everything that Carly has done on behalf of child care. I just wanted to remark on what an amazing collaboration I have observed between the Housing Authority and the town with respect to these matters. It's very impressive to me that we've been able to come together the way we have, and to see it develop. And I remember Deputy Town Administrator Dan Weber saying, "Well, we're building the plane as we're flying it," which is my least favorite idiom. That I hate that idea because that sounds really, really dangerous to me. I don't think that's really what we were doing, but we have learned along the way quite a bit about this. And in my comments, I mentioned how the Housing Authority is reprioritizing projects. That's a great example of what we learned through this process, because even though we have the 6E money, which is substantial, it is not near enough to do much other than hit around the edges, which is part of the reason that I feel so strongly about these citizen initiatives, because they would really frustrate private development. And the Housing Authority is great with respect to low income or moderate income housing for people, particularly on the rental side. It's much more challenging on the ownership side, but they can't do it all and will never be able to do it all. Private development is critical to provide workforce housing here, particularly given the age of our housing stock, because our housing stock is relatively old and needs to be refurbished over time. And all we've really got available to us is infill type development. That's the reality of the world here. And so frustrating infill development will have a corresponding impact, negative impact in my mind, on our ability to meet workforce housing needs. So having said that, I just wanted to compliment the staff and the board of the Housing Authority and the staff involved for a really outstanding job in really developing. I'm sure we'll continue to learn more as we go along, particularly on the ownership side and on the childcare side as well. But I really think kudos are in order for staff with respect to those matters.
Do you want to make a motion to approve that item now?
Yes.
Or go ahead. Or if you have other questions.
I have a comment about this as to why I didn't pull it off consent agenda. So I appreciate that you did. I brought my questions for this, but I heard some comments earlier this evening that gave me hope that we are looking at this from the side of trustee. We had a trustee talk a few days ago, and one of the things that came up was, why is the Housing Authority buying everything that becomes available? Why is the Housing Authority moving with such speed? Why are we buying everything when we have occupancy issues? So I have a list of questions about answering those constituent questions with regard to this funding plan. But what I heard tonight was that perhaps that's not the objective, and that's not exactly what's happening, that we're looking at the process and how things are going, and we're making adjustments as we go. So I am heartened by that, Trustee Brown, for your report from the meeting, and I did not pull out my list of questions, and I was going to let this go through on the consent agenda, because I think there are a lot of people that are watching this, and it is an opportunity for our community to do a good job. And I appreciate that that the Housing Authority is looking at and finding balance between housing, childcare. This is a developing thing. I'm watching. I know that people are watching and asking me, and I think it's really important to balance this as we go forward and not use it because we have it, because that is the feeling of some of the constituents that relate to me. You can't just spend it because you have it. You have to be thoughtful about the long-range goals. So I am encouraged by that. I'm trying to give you space and not go to the Housing Authority meetings, but it's getting harder as I know I can, and the public can, and the public should. This is a public process. It's a public board. We should attend meetings. We should pay attention. But I guess that's a vote of support that I did not say, pull this from the agenda. I have questions. So I appreciate the way it's going, and to continue to stay laser focused on the long-term success of this. So I'd support it, but thanks for the opportunity to comment.
I'd like to, can we bring up
Yes, we
Scott
can.
Moulton?
Yeah.
If you could speak to the Housing Authority and its change of its focus over time.
I wasn't prepared to talk tonight on this, but I certainly am happy to. And if there's any direct questions, Trustee Eigel, that you care to ask, this is an opportunity. In terms of how the Housing Authority and our board sort of reallocate or look at resources, as much money as 6E brings to childcare and housing solutions, it really is a drop in the bucket when it comes to housing. Even though it's $5.5 million annually in total, housing is expensive to produce. Our most recent estimates that we've received across multiple properties indicate that our total cost of development is anywhere from about $650,000 to as high as $900,000 per door to produce either a rental or ownership unit. So you can do the math, and that it's difficult to produce housing at reasonable rates. So 6E doesn't really provide enough funding for multiple developments to occur at the same time. So that's why we're looking to move the Riverside property through enough of the pre-development and development approval process so that when we have funding available to go vertical, or when we can find other sources of funding to make a development work, we'll pursue that. But right now, where we are with other opportunities, primarily fish hatchery, those are more cost effective, so we're looking to explore what is the best value for our dollar in the moment. And I do want to address one additional thing briefly, if I could, Trustee Eigel. The idea or concept that EPHA as an entity is pursuing or buying everything that comes on the market is far from true. I certainly see how it could feel or seem that way. We've purchased 2 vacant parcels of land, and we have purchased 3 existing properties. Those 3 existing properties, 2 of them were converted from short-term rental use to workforce housing. The other one was a preservation to keep those 16 units affordable in the long term. So we are moving with speed, but with purpose, grounded by our mission.
Thank you.
Could you speak about the occupancy issue? Because that keeps coming up too, about the, obviously we've added a whole lot of workforce capability and it's going to take a while to absorb it. But certainly the housing assessments have shown the need for it, so.
Yeah, so in quick numbers off the top of my head, so give me a little bit of leeway with these numbers. We added, both via private development and what EPHA was able to accomplish, a little over 200 workforce units in less than 8 months. That it represents about 3% of our valley-wide housing stock, which is about 9,500 units. That's a substantial increase in terms of percentage of housing units that we added in a short time frame. Of those 209-ish units that we added to inventory as a community, we've absorbed in about 9 months 70% of that inventory. That is a very strong indicator of the pent-up demand that was there for housing. It would not be normal to absorb all of those in, say, 90 days, 3 months, 6 months. While the pace is a little bit slower than both the private developer and EPHA expected at Fall River Village, it is not outside the realm of normalcy considering the numbers that are involved. So we, both properties continue to lease up, and we fully anticipate stabilization, if not early next year, certainly as we go into Q2 in 2026. And none of this falls that far outside the realm of our expectations.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve Resolution 9225, the 2026 Annual 6E Funding Plan.
I'll second that.
Trustee Brown moved to approve item 5 from the original consent agenda, Resolution 9225. And Trustee Youngland seconded. We can have a vote. Item approved unanimously. I should make note that you see that we have 3 trustees out for various reasons. We do have a legal quorum with the 4 who are here, which certainly could have some impact on voting items, but it's legal. So we're good to go. We will move on to reports and discussion items, outside entities. I don't know why he's called an outside entity, with a municipal court update with our favorite judge, Judge Thrower, who usually when I see him, he's sitting up here and he's asking the questions.
It feels weird to be down here, if I'm honest, but always a pleasure, Mayor, members of the Board of Trustees. I try to come here once a year, apart from our time together during sort of the HR cycle, to just give a report on what's happening in municipal court. Feedback that I've gotten in the past is people appreciate some numbers and some insight as to what happens there. I know many of you have been there to visit court. One of you saw 2 super exciting trials back in, I believe, February. In any event, just as an overview, Estes Park has a court of record with very limited exceptions. Jail is not a possible penalty except for contempt. That requires us to be somewhat creative in the way we do things. I preside in 8 courts. I'm relief in 3 others. I continue to view the role of the municipal court as that of preserving rights and when appropriate, changing behavior, particularly at this level. I therefore practice evidence-based sentencing, that is, using sentences which tend to encourage compliance as opposed to only punish. Punishment is appropriate in some cases, but in many cases, maintaining a relationship between the defendant and the court makes better sense. We do a good job in our court here of using deferred judgments, referrals to restorative justice, and self-supervised probation as a way to continue to encourage people to comply. We've had some personnel changes in the court over the past few years. Ms. Beers has stepped up and is running sort of the day-to-day court administration issues, so my thanks to her for that. That can be a challenging position for sure. Our associate judge is Howard Bartlett. He lives in this area. He's a capable jurist. He's a magistrate, or was a magistrate in Denver, and has considerable experience, and I trust him to do a great job as he has. It's my understanding he's actually done some administrative hearing work for the clerk's office. Our prosecutor is an attorney named Avi Rocklin. I do work with her in another jurisdiction. She's a very thoughtful and capable prosecutor. As far as changes that I've made in the court over the past, since I talked to you last, I suppose, I updated the court's fine schedule for traffic infractions. I've sent that to the police department. We're waiting for them to be able to input that into their ticketing software, which is not always as easy as it should be. When it's ready, we'll update that and I'll adopt that as an order of the court. As many of you know, municipal courts have faced increasing regulation from the state of Colorado, including things like providing attorneys for in-custody defendants, the use of PR bonds. To keep up with that constant changing environment, I've attended all of the Colorado Municipal Judges Association conferences, except one. In the 11 years I've been a judge, I served on their board. I'm past president. I taught a segment at the 2025 Estes Park Citizens Academy. Many people had questions about the changes to the justice system that have originated down in Denver with our representatives, and that was a rousing discussion, and not just because my wife was there to ask me questions either. When I was appointed to the bench here in Estes Park, I was offered a budget to use for my judicial education updates. I've asked that that be applied to my ability to hire court-appointed counsel in appropriate cases. So I've never used that money. I've used it to hire an attorney. I did hire an attorney this past year. You don't have a right to an attorney in municipal court if jail is not a possible penalty, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have one if I have concerns about your ability to understand what's happening here today. So in one case, I was able to find an attorney who was willing to make the drive, and he was approved by the Colorado Office of Alternative Defense Counsel, who oversees court-appointed counsel on behalf of municipalities. And that turned out to be a very successful appointment. I was very happy about that. As I mentioned earlier, we had 2 criminal trials this year, one of which was an assault case. Facts and figures from this past year, this is just so far in 2025, 169 cases have been written into the municipal court. 74 of those were concluded prior to court through an early payment or early plea. The breakdown of that is about 78% of those matters were either traffic or parking cases, 22% were code and criminal cases. By that I mean things like animal cases, which we see a fair number of, unfortunately, business licenses, theft, assault and harassment, and some sound and noise complaint. I look back at my notes. For some reason, I don't think I came here in 2023, or 2024 rather, at least in the October meeting. So I do have the 2024, 176 tickets were issued then. The breakdowns were about the same in terms of the number of traffic and criminal cases. 2023, 158 citations issued, 72% traffic, 28% criminal code violations. So we're fairly consistent in this jurisdiction with the number of cases we see. Certainly the court has bandwidth to do whatever is required of it based on the tickets issued by the police department. Court is at 9 a.m. on the first Wednesday of the month. Please come, see what it's like, except this month, we're meeting on Monday. I'm not sure why. I think one of us had a scheduling issue we were able to accommodate, so we will be in session 9 a.m. on Monday. I am done. If I had more time, it would have been shorter. Any questions?
we really appreciate the fact that you do come up every month, that you're so conscientious, that your focus is on behavior correction, if you will, or movement toward the good, however we want to put it, and the other additional bonuses of even securing assistance for legal assistance for some of the folks who might be in most need. So thank you for what you do for our community.
It's my absolute pleasure, Mayor. Thank you.
Judge Thrower, I have a question. You know, because of the limited scope of municipal judge authority, do we have any statistics on county prosecutions for things happening in our jurisdiction that could be shared?
That would be something the police department would have. So
Okay.
they have the discretion to decide whether or not a case should be written into municipal court or into county court. I do not keep that data.
Okay.
I keep the data that I'm responsible for. My impression is they do a really good job of discerning what should go where, for sure. The county court does a great job. They're a lot busier than we are, and that means they don't usually have the time perhaps to pay attention to certain kinds of cases like we can here. If you can tell I'm proud about that, I am. The problem with me talking about municipal court is getting me to stop. So we appreciate everything the county and the district courts do for us as well. To answer your question, I do not have that data.
Well, fair
And
enough,
they
fair
would.
enough. I
They would.
appreciate that. I just want to get a sense of evaluating the extent to which there is crime in this community compared to other communities, and what, my sense is that it's not much. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot. You look at the police report and it's usually an OWI. That's typically the or whatever acronym there is in Colorado for it, for drunk driving. So, I think the community is interested in the extent to which crime does occur here, and that's probably, as you say, more an appropriate question for the police. So, thank you.
Certainly.
I think we're good, and we thank you again.
Thank you all. Take care.
We have reached action items. And item 1 is to accept delivery of the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2024. Of course, we have Director Williamson at the helm.
Zimmerman.
What did I say?
Williamson.
Williamson, yeah. Jackie's sister.
So I should be able to.
Zimmerman it is. I got it right the first time around tonight. So.
Where is my, it's that one. No, that is not it. There it is. Mayor and trustees, Tammy Zimmerman, Finance Director. So this evening, we'd like to formally accept the Haney and Company audit of the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, also abbreviated ACFR, for the year ended December 31st of 2024. You should have received either a bound copy or we have an electronic copy. We have it posted on our website of the actual document, the ACFR. The audit covers the town's operations, including its 2 component units, the Visit Estes Park and the Estes Park Housing Authority. And I will note that this is the second year that we have included the Estes Park Housing Authority in our overall audit. And that was primarily due to the significance of the lodging tax that was passed back in 2023. And we also want to note that I want to extend my appreciation to the finance staff. They worked diligently to get the audit presented to you this evening. They worked exceptionally long hours, put in a lot of effort. My first audit with the town, they made it seamless.
We do have Ty Coleman, the audit partner, and Abby Irvine, the audit manager with Haney and Company. They met with the audit committee on October 1st, and we went over the results of the ACFR and the audit. And the independent auditors report, they can explain it with their presentation, but we did receive a clean audit opinion. And we're going to go over some of the comments that they had this evening in their presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them up.
Hello again and welcome.
Great to be here this evening. So I'm Ty Holman, lead audit partner in the annual financial statement audit for the town. This is Abby Irvine, audit manager on the annual financial statement audit. A few items we'll run through. We're going to kind of tag team this a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about our engagement team, high level of what our audit procedures are, what we do. We'll go over our audit communications, talk a little bit about audit adjustments, and then a few final thoughts, and that will round things out. I'll turn the time over to Abby.
Thanks, Ty. Real quick, just Ty's introduced us. This is the engagement team. We're engaged directly by the audit committee in the town. If there's ever any questions that come up as part of the audit, if any trustee, mayor, anyone has any questions, there's our contact information. We certainly are happy to answer any that come up during the year. We're actually getting ready to start next year's audit here soon. So happy to talk about 2024, and then we can just roll into 2025. Real quick, we'll just kind of go through what the audit process entails, including audit procedures. This is just a graphic of the process. So really the process starts, we do pre-planning. That's usually in December each year. We identify where we're going to focus our audit and identify areas of the financial statements that we deem high risk. We perform a risk assessment, and that's based on our judgment, kind of based on our experience. We have worked with the town for the last 4 years, I believe, 4 or 5 years on the audit. So we've got a little bit of history to kind of know what we want to dive into as we're getting ready, but certainly talk about any sort of new areas, large transactions, things like that that are going to help us focus our audit procedures. From there, we dive in. We come on site every May to perform the audit. And as Tammy mentioned, it does include the town's financial statements in addition to component units. So component units are just an accounting term for other legal entities that get included in the financial statements of the town. It's similar to a consolidation in the private financial reporting world. And so those two separate entities, the Housing Authority and Visit Estes Park, meet the definition to be included in the financial statements. Typically, the audit is completed much sooner than it has been the last couple of years, and that's because we are required to include both those component units. The Housing Authority's audit report is required to be done so that we can include those numbers in the town's financials, and that was the reason for the delay this year in getting the audit kind of finalized to this place where we are today to talk about it. As I mentioned, we come on site every May, dive into transactions so that we're able to offer the audit opinion. As Tammy mentioned, we did offer a clean audit opinion. So there's 3 audit opinions in the financial statements. We offer an opinion over the financial statements themselves. We also perform a single audit, which is like a federal award audit. That focuses on compliance and internal controls over federal grants. This year there was one major federal grant that we focused on. That's going to kind of vary every single year if the town's over the threshold. And the threshold for that is $750,000 in federal expenditures. So you expend that much money related to federal grants, and then you're subject to this additional audit that we perform. And so again, there's the 3 audit opinions, all clean, all unmodified for the year related to the audit that we performed. As we wrap up our field work, then we work on issuing the financial report. Everyone has a copy of it. It's the ACFR, as mentioned, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. It's very large. There's a lot of information contained in that. I encourage everyone, if you were to just dive into one section, read the management discussion and analysis. That's towards the front of the report. It's written by the finance department, just summarizes at a very high level the financial activities of the town for the year. And it's just really informative and really gives you a good overview of what the entire report includes. So we, as mentioned, we have issued the financial statements. They were issued as of September 29th. The town is required to file the financial statements with the state of Colorado because you receive the separate single audit over the federal wards. You're also required to file with the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. The audit has been filed with all of those agencies, and so that's all been done. Just specifically regarding the audit opinion, so it covers various areas of the town's financial reporting. It includes governmental activities, business type activities, so those are going to be the enterprise funds. Each major fund, that's an accounting determination, that includes the general fund. There's a large capital projects funds that falls under that. Non-major funds, so those are just going to be the smaller funds of the town, the component units, and then the related notes. So the notes follow the financial statements. Those are also covered under our audit opinion. So as auditors, we are required to follow generally accepted accounting standards. We're also required to make sure the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So these are kind of the guiding forces that we follow in order to issue our audit opinion, which was clean or unmodified as mentioned. So the objective of a financial statement audit is to obtain reasonable and not absolute assurance. That's still the highest level of assurance that you can achieve in financial reporting. It means that we don't audit everything. We audit things on a sampling basis, but that sample allows us to offer an opinion on the financial statements as a whole. The town enters into thousands of transactions. We can't possibly audit all of those transactions, but we do identify certain ones that we're going to dive into that, again, allow us to be able to offer an opinion on the financial statements. And as mentioned, we talked about the component units. Just real quick high-level highlights of the report. So there are multiple sets of financial statements presented. The government-wide financial statements are basically all of the activities of the town presented together on a full accrual basis. And so that's a different measurement than some of the other financial statements. So it's got your governmental activities, it's got your enterprise activities or your business type activities, it's got your component unit summary in there as well. Then the fund financial statements follow. So those are presented on a modified accrual or more in line with budgetary reporting. That includes just the governmental funds, so the general fund, capital projects funds, special revenue funds of the town. Those are included in the fund financial statements. There's another set of financial statements, the enterprise funds. So those are going to be water, power and communication. Those are funds that primarily operate like businesses. They charge citizens for services, and they are presented on a full accrual basis as well. So a different accounting focus is included in those financial statements, similar to the government-wide financial statements. The accounting policies follow. Those just dive into the why and the how as to why certain numbers are reported in the financial statements as we have to follow according to standards. There are a couple significant notes that would be the capital asset note. There's a lot of capital activity going on throughout the town, and so that note does summarize the activity during the year in terms of additions and any sort of changes that were made and ending balances regarding capital projects, capital assets. Additionally, long-term debt is included. It's the same presentation as the capital asset note. It presents changes. And then there are tables that describe the various debt issuances of the town, kind of the terms of those debt issuances, terms and maturity, things like that. And then every fund that has a budget adopted, there are budget to actual schedules included within the financial statements. Those are presented throughout the report. There From an audit standpoint, we focus on if there was any funds over budget. There were no funds over budget in 2024. Ty's going to go through next the required communications. And so as part of the audit process, we issue a letter at the conclusion of every audit, and we discuss this with the audit committee, just going over our findings, and this is our required auditor communications that we're required to issue as we finalize audits.
Great. So yeah, so I'll cover those areas of this letter. So we issue a letter that contains the required communications. This will just be a summary of what you'll see in that letter or may have already seen. So changes in accounting policies or new accounting policies adopted. GASB statement number 101 was adopted during the year. That deals with compensated absences and how those are reported. The short of it is that does require a retrospective application of that standard, which means you go back and you restate your beginning net position as if that standard had been in place forever. So you'll see a restatement related to that. It's purely just due to a change in accounting standards that were issued by the Government Accounting Standards Board. It was an overall increase in the liability, but not overly significant, but you can see the details in the ACFR. We do look at accounting estimates. Any number that's affected by estimation that's significant, we take a closer look at that. Estimates, just by their nature, are open to or have a greater likelihood of potentially being either miscalculated or on the far end of things potentially manipulated to affect the financial statements. So we want to make sure we look at estimates, we make sure they're in line with expectations, there's nothing unusual there. You can see the list of estimates that we've identified. We didn't identify any issues within those significant estimates. We found those to be reasonable and in line with expectations. If we were to have any disagreements during the audit, anything that was maybe a contentious matter, anything that required any type of outside consultations, bringing someone in, getting another opinion, things like that, we would have to communicate that. We didn't encounter anything like that, and so no issues in that area. Difficulties encountered during the audit or in performing the audit. The only item to just note there, as Abby mentioned, we issued our opinions and completed things later in the year than we typically would like to. We generally like to be earlier in the year, and there are certain deadlines that are actually earlier in the year that we try to hit those deadlines. We were waiting on the audited financial statements from the Housing Authority to get those incorporated into the financial statements so that we could issue the final opinion. So there were some delays related to that. Other than that, no other difficulties encountered. We work well with the accounting staff, and they were a great help to us in getting us everything that we need, and always very good at providing the information that's needed to complete the audit. I already kind of covered the management consultations. There were none that we're aware of. We do obtain certain representations in the form of a letter. That representation letter basically contains representations from accounting and finance staff that basically says things like, you gave us everything that was there, you didn't withhold anything from us, what you told us in this area was accurate, things like that, just things that are representations that the audit was done and that we were provided with everything that we needed to complete that. That has been obtained and was signed prior to the issuance of our final reports. Other matters, just a quick mention, we're required to just mention there are required supplemental information within the ACFR as well as other supplemental information. Required supplemental information, we don't provide an opinion on that where there's no assurance on that. We do look at that information, we tie it out, we make sure it kind of coincides with what's in the ACFR, but we don't actually provide an opinion. The other supplemental information is in relation to opinion. That basically means we look at it, we tie it out, we make sure it makes sense, and that it doesn't contradict what's within the financial statements themselves. No issues in those areas, but we're required to mention that. As Abby mentioned, there's a single audit that was performed over one major program. You can see that listed there, Water and Waste Disposal Systems for Rural Communities Grant from the USDA. And no findings related to compliance with that. The single audit requires us to look at internal controls and compliance specifically around the use of those funds, and no issues or areas there. In addition, so we do look at internal controls as part of our procedures. We don't generally test internal controls except for, as I mentioned, related to a single audit. However, during the process of an audit, if we identify items or anything within the audit that we consider to be a potential reportable issue of internal controls, we're required to communicate that. So last year, you may recall, there was a material weakness over internal controls related to, I believe, inventory, and that was reported. We generally come back in the next year, take a look at that, and make sure that everything is good, and that item has been cleared and is no longer a reportable condition for 2024. For 2024, we do have one item that we consider to be a significant deficiency in internal controls that we've reported. That's related to the review process over certain areas that resulted in adjusting journal entries, or what that means is basically we came in and found certain errors and things that needed to be corrected in order to get to the final financial statements. Just a quick overview, there are varying levels of those reportable type items, and a material weakness actually is kind of at the top of that hierarchy. So you don't have that, that's a good thing. A significant deficiency is below that, and that's kind of where we're at in that second tier. So something that we're required to communicate, but definitely not something that's overly significant, I would say, but just something that we want you all to be aware of. At this point, our comment would be on that really it's corrected, or it's no longer really an issue. A lot of that, I think, was due to staff turnover, changes in the accounting system, and that just, there inherently will kind of raise opportunities for there to be errors or things that need to be corrected that we identified during the audit. So that's kind of the overview on that. We do have audit adjustments, as I mentioned, during the audit. Corrected and uncorrected, that list has been provided, and the full list of all the adjusting journal entries has been provided. We won't go into detail on those tonight, but they've all been corrected, and the financial statements that you see include those corrections to get to a good set of financial statements. I've mentioned the significant deficiency over internal control, and that again relates to those adjustments that we identified. Upcoming pronouncements, I'm not going to go into really any detail on these. There are 3 that are kind of upcoming that we've got here. Nothing overly significant that I would mention. If you remember recent years, there were things like leases and pensions and these huge changes in financial statement reporting. Nothing like that, and thankfully things have slowed down a little bit at the GASB. So, but that's what's upcoming. With that, Happy to answer any questions or elaborate on anything that we covered tonight.
Thanks for the good work, and I'm glad you proactively kind of explained some of the thought process on that one, what's it called?
A significant deficiency.
Significant deficiency, because, the word significant gets people's attention, but I think, the staff turnover and I think our current practices feel to be in very good shape right now. So glad it was identified and stated. I have no questions. Some of us sat on the audit committee too, so we've been through all this in even more detail.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I'm very impressed by the thoroughness of the audit and the approach you take, and I'm very, very impressed by our internal staff. I'm one of the few that would actually read this thing. As my wife says, spreadsheets are your love language. Well, I hope I'm not that unromantic, but I even read most of the notes to the financials. I have to confess, didn't get deeply into the supplemental stuff, but it's a very impressive report in excess of 100 pages, very, very transparent, which is, I have to give credit to our staff for, teasing that out so much so that we have as much detail as we do. So I would move that we accept the report as required by state statutes.
That's okay, but I have to give the opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to make public comment on the audit, and I see no motion out there, therefore we can continue. Do I have a
I'll
second?
make the motion.
Yeah.
I'd second the motion.
Trustee Brown moved to accept the audited financial statement, and Trustee Eigel seconded. Any other discussion by the board? We can vote. Four for four. Yeah, good shape. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I do believe that Director Zimmerman will come back for item 2, which is the appointment of Haney and Company to perform the audit of the annual financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2025.
That's correct. Mayor and trustees, Tammy Zimmerman, Finance Director. So as we just had our audit firm, Haney and Company, come up and speak about how they need to judge us and give us lots of opinions on how we're doing, we're going to request that we also employ them to do that again for this next fiscal year. State statute, grant agreements, and other regulations require that the town conduct an annual audit on their ACFR. And the audit committee has reviewed the extension of the use of Haney and Company and has recommended, as well as the finance staff. We believe that an additional year, especially during this year of transition with our new accounting system software that's going live real quickly, will be a valuable input to keeping us. They're going to know where all the transitions are. We have a whole new set of chart of accounts. They have the familiarity and the history. So we are recommending that we stick with Haney and Company for our fiscal year 2025 audit. Is there any comments or questions?
Yeah, that continuity alone is a really good reason. Don't change all the factors at the same time is a good thing.
So I would agree with that on this issue with this company at this moment. But I wonder what, Director, would precipitate you saying, maybe we should look to an RFP for competitive bids. I mean, obviously Haney came in at a time when we thought, let's take a look at our options. What would precipitate that for you?
So There's some municipalities that it's written into their procedures that you must go out to bid every 3 or 5 years. We do not have that requirement. But we will be going out for an RFP after this next fiscal year. And it's to, there's pros and cons for staying with that continuity, that they know and have the relationship with you. And there's the pro of a different set of eyes to look at your business operations. So we will be going through that process, and but with this fiscal year, and as our auditors have mentioned, we are gearing up for them to be on site very quickly, because we've just wrapped this up and we're starting again.
And I appreciate that. I don't think convenience should be a reason to stick with a company. And I think there's some other relationships the town has that we have to look at on a regular basis to get a fresh look and to provide the community with a perspective that we're not just going with the easiest one. Now, having looked at everything that I've seen, this is a smart decision this year. I think that continuity will be very valuable. And the service they've provided has been appropriately critical of the town. And I think they've been very honest, candid, and they've given us an opportunity to see what's going on. So I would support that.
Okay.
And in my nearly 5 decades of business, for-profit and not-for-profit, yeah, the 5-year is a typical. In this case, with the ERP change, and we know we had staffing changes, I think it's a good exception to the rule. But I agree with Trustee Eigel. That'll be a good thing to go out for RFP at that point. Other comments, or can I open it up to the public if there's any public comment on this item? And I do not see any. Based on that, we could have a motion.
Mayor, I'd move that we appoint Haney and Company to perform the audit of the annual financial report for the year ending 2025.
Second.
Trustee Eigel made the motion to approve appointment of Haney and Company for the 2025 fiscal year audit, and Trustee Brown seconded. We can move forward with a vote. All right, we'll see you again. Thanks, folks. We can move to action item 3, 2026 Visit Estes Park Operating Plan, and I believe this is Town Administrator Mahalik.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is in front of the board for action tonight. Per the terms of your agreement with the Larimer County Board of County Commissioners, Visit Estes Park is required to file their operating plan every year by the end of September. That operating plan has to identify services that they will provide, marketing or promotion tax that they plan to levy, and any additional information that the board requests or requires about their activities in the coming year. The town board met in a joint session with the county commissioners on October 15th of this year to review the plan. At that time, that plan was advanced to this meeting for town board consideration. If the board approves the plan tonight, I believe the county commissioners plan to act next. I'm happy to answer any questions about the process. I cannot answer any questions about the plan.
I believe the items that were brought up when it was brought before this board are appropriately reflected. The most recent meeting of the VEP board just a couple days ago, I believe made a slight modification to the Frozen Dead Guy Days marketing step-down amount. Was that just on the 23rd or whatever it was?
Made a modification to what, Mayor? I'm sorry.
In the Frozen, there was a proposal from the Bosco, who provides the management of the whole Frozen Dead Guy Days, and there was a column in there where they asked for a certain amount. The board, the operating plan had a straight $19,000 per year for the marketing amount, and in the course of the discussion by the VEP board, they discussed having a step-down amount over the 3 years of the contract rather than a straight 19, like a 50, 30, 19 or something like that. I do not know whether that has been inscribed or.
I don't believe, I have not received an updated copy of a 2026 operating plan. Town Clerk's Office, Deputy Town Clerk Beers, have you received anything from Visit Estes Park?
To my knowledge, the clerk's office hasn't received anything new outside of what was provided in the packet.
So Mayor, absent that information, unless the board would like to continue this item to the next meeting, which would allow me to reach out to Visit Estes Park, what we have is the document that was submitted a few weeks ago, so I do not think it would be reflective of anything that happened in a recent Visit Estes Park Board meeting.
Trustee Igo.
Mayor, I wonder if trustees Sanak or Hazelton has provided any input or summary to this for us to consider tonight in their absence. I know Mayor Pro Tem Sanak was unexpectedly and unavoidably not able to attend. Trustee Hazelton knew there was going to be an absence, but like I'm a representative of the community, those two trustees are my representative to Visit Estes Park. And I would suggest or make a motion that we continue or table this until we can get the input from those trustees on this very important issue that has been dynamic, changing, very high interest to the community, the business community, the residents, the character of Estes Park. So I think this is important enough to wait until we can get the input from our representatives to speak on how we vote on this. I think we have the time to do that.
Mayor, I will add just one clarification item because it may help. December 5th is the deadline for the town and the county to take action. So even if it comes back to the 12th, there's still plenty of time for the county to consider it.
So at the time that you're ready to entertain it, I will make a motion that we continue this to the next meeting where we have the representatives that can address questions.
Trustee Youngland.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well, but that there was some changes to the marketing dollars that was going to go towards Frozen Dead Guys, but my understanding, the operating plan wasn't going to be affected. That's what they told, that's what I understood from Kirby, is because it was after they presented that they had the meeting, and they backed down the dollars in which they were going to spend for advertising. I don't think, I'm not certain that the plan really breaks down, exactly. I think they can move dollars within things that they advertise, use of advertising funds. So I think that's why maybe Kirby especially was maybe not thinking that needed to be brought to the board, because those dollars are still going to be there and spent for advertising, just juggled around a bit. But I support, holding off. I don't think there's any reason to move forward when we have some questions and they're not here to ask. But just in speaking with Kirby right before she left, that was my understanding, that she didn't feel it was going to affect the operating plan decision.
Because it was a slight increase rather than decrease, I'd have a little bit of concern there in approving a smaller amount than they anticipate spending, since we're trying to have precision with that operating plan. Trustee Brown.
So I share your feeling about it, Trustee Youngland, that it wasn't going to change the operating plan. It was internal, and the operating plan remains pretty much the same. It's just a reallocation within that budget. So, but I think it probably does make sense to wait until the next meeting as long as we have the time. I think getting the input from those two would be very important.
I don't know what the schedule of the Board of Commissioners is, and you indicated that they would still have time to consider. I'm not sure what their frequency is before December 5, so.
We should have plenty of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I add, your follow-up commentary was about Frozen Dead Guy Days specifically. I'm not specifically commenting about any issue or dollar amount. I am commenting on, those are the people that I want to hear from as a recommendation, that this is solid, and in their attendance at every meeting and every issue, they know what's going on there. I would like to hear it from their mouths and not just, well, I think I heard, or we have a report to one trustee and there's no communication to the board or the public on a support for that. So I would still make that motion that we table
Yeah.
this.
You can go ahead and make the motion.
So I would make a motion that we table this item number 3, the 2026 Visit Estes Park Operating Plan, until the next suitable meeting that we have our representatives that are our liaisons to that board present.
I'll second.
And, final comment on that. I believe they made a motion and a second and approved that change. So anyway, we can go ahead and vote on the motion.
Part of my motion, I want to make sure it's reflected in the record, is that our liaisons are present for the vote. And is that, I wasn't just rambling, that was specifically included, that our liaisons are here.
Well,
Thanks.
And good to put that in here, interject that right here. Okay, the motion passes. We'll reconsider, presumably with the full board. Item 4, we actually have a public hearing. We have a couple in a row. The next order of business will be the public hearing on action item 4, the 2026 proposed budget, including highway users trust fund revenues. And there will also be a continued public hearing and board action on Wednesday, November 12th. So there will be no action at the end of this public hearing. At this hearing, the Board of Trustees shall consider the information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, public comment, written comments received on the budget. Any member of the board may ask questions at any stage of the public hearing, which may be responded to at that time. This public hearing is open, and Director Zimmerman. Whoops.
So as the mayor mentioned, this is the first public hearing whereby we invite the public to provide comments or get feedback or ask questions on the proposed operating and capital budget for 2026. As we had already put in our budget study sessions, this is our budget summary where we have a projected revenue of 85 million, expenses around 88 million, and use of fund balance for capital projects of 2.9 million. And fund balance is likened to your savings account, where it's for one-time capital projects where we have an excess from the previous year where we hadn't spent all of our fund balance. And so we can carry it over for one-time projects. So just as a refresher of our budget timeline, we had our first and second town board study sessions in September and October, and right now on the October 28th, we have our first public hearing. We will continue that on to November 12th with our second public hearing and anticipated budget approval by the town board. We have a deadline of December 15th in order to submit our certified property tax levy to the county commissioners. January 31st, we need to submit our adopted budget to the state. And then in January 2026, we make available the digital and the physical budget documents to the public. And the budget for 2026 is, again, it's guided with a strong fiscally conservative and transparent procedures that were already in place with the guiding template of our strategic plan. And ultimate goal with our budget is to maintain fund security. With this budget, we maintain our balances at or above our Finance Policy 660, which for the general fund, that's 25%, or you can think of it as in terms of 90 days of operating expenditures. And I'll mention that the fund balance that we're showing for our 2026 budget, and that's assuming that everything is spent with our 2026 budget. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it does not. Most likely it doesn't. We have vacancies. But with that being completely spent, we're projecting with the general fund and the community reinvestment fund, we end up at a 31.2% fund balance. So the general fund is at 26.1%, and our community reinvestment is at 5.1%. Some key takeaways from this proposed budget is we're projecting a flat sales tax, and we're maintaining our strong reserves. We are establishing a $1.5 million reserve for our future police facility. And another item that I need to note and call out is that the highway user tax funding, or the gas tax, we have to identify that we're projecting revenue of $275,000 with all of those proceeds going towards street maintenance expenditures. And then we have project funds that we have capital project budget as well as our operating budget. We do anticipate that we'll be rolling over some of our larger project funds. They are multi-year. Those are, for instance, Trailblazer, grid hardening, wildfire mitigation, Grays Avenue, Cleve Street. And we will be bringing in a forthcoming town board meeting a revised 2025 budget amendment where we're kind of shoring up, and as we're getting closer to year end, we're reallocating those line items and making sure that we are on target. So there is only one proposed position change in the 2026 budget, and that is a 0.5 full-time equivalent, or FTE, and that's in the parking service fund. It's a separate fund, and it is for a parking and transit assistant that works seasonally. And we have about $4 million in our capital improvement plan project for the 2026 timeline, and those we went over with all the departments during our budget study sessions. They talked about their projects. And there were no changes to this budget that was presented during the study sessions. And so the next step is really to open up the public hearing for comment, and then we'll continue the public hearing on November 12th, which is actually a Wednesday.
Oh, that's right. Is it, I think it's Veterans Day, or that pushes us to the Wednesday instead of the Tuesday. So first, are there any public comments to be made on this topic of the budget? I see no motion. Board? Oh, is there someone? Yeah. Oh, you were right behind Tammy there. So need to have a longer arm, John.
I didn't raise it. My name's John Guffey, and I live at 561 Chapin Lane. I just want to kind of reiterate my concern about the 1.5 million set aside for the building of a new law enforcement operation. And I recognize that's not a lot of money, and it's not bound to a particular job or timeline, which is all very good. It's fine to have that in reserve. I would just like to continue to reiterate the need for the community to closely examine any desire to grow and build and consume property, and in particular, if it's going to impinge on school children's experience, particularly with the volume of traffic and police moving, and I don't know the details of where that funding could be assigned, but if it's in a negotiated exchange of land with the school district, I would want to really question that effort. But keep the money and use it well.
Thank you. Other public comments on this item? All right, board, questions, comments? Trustee, no one? Trustee Igo.
I tried to wait. I want to call your attention to 532. Page 532, the packet this meeting is 670, I'm not looking with blame, but it's a big packet that we have today. So this is a general question about our capital improvement plan projects. 2026, 4 million, 27, 26 million, 2028, 125 million, 2029, 15 million. I just want to open that up for the public to pay attention, look ahead. There are a lot of things coming. Does this, what work or expense does approving this budget have on the capital improvement projects? I don't think it commits us. This is more strategic planning, but it's an appendix, it's an attachment to this budget. Is there any implication that this commits us to these projects in the future? I just want to hear you say it in public.
So the capital improvement plan is important to look at.
Yes.
It's an important document to discuss. One of the areas that I have on our budget debrief follow-up is to figure out how we discuss that in a more concentrated way. We often just focus on the next budget year, which is what we are committing to. That's what's in the budget. But the out years are important because this is how big projects wind their way through the system. It's also important to note the financing pieces of that. You look into the out years and a lot of those costs are projected grant funding, projected debt. So no, we're not committing to out year projects. They're on the plan, we're working through it, and we are looking at those and intending to proceed forward with those projects, but we're not committing to them. So just because it's in the capital plan does not mean it's going to happen. It is important if there are public concerns about future, even out to 2030 or the out years, now is the time to start discussing them so that we can make sure we have the most accurate packet of priorities put together in that CIP, recognizing that, the funding limitations and the grant assumptions and the debt assumptions are really the limiting factors for us.
Well, and you've stolen my point, which I appreciate that it came out of your mouth instead of mine, because I'm not a complainer per se, but I am often trying to look at how we can communicate better with the community. And Mr. Guffey makes a great point. And I think I'm becoming more of an environmentalist just listening to John address us on a regular basis. The passion and the perspective that he gives is that we really do need to be mindful of not what's going on today, but what's going on down the road. And I think that some of the things that he raises come up in our next 5 years or longer when we're looking at committing $40 million to a 20-year project. And so, Town Administrator, what you said was, now's the time to look at that and get involved. It's easy to look at the list of projects that are coming. This packet, 600 pages, there are some very interesting pages in here that say what the town is thinking about and what the people who are involved in these projects are currently looking for grant opportunities to engage the community with projects that will have a significant impact on how we live and how we spend our money in the coming years. So now's the time. This is the process, and there's really good treasure and gold in this document that is worth looking at. Even skim through it, pick out the things that interest you, get engaged as a community member to make your opinion known now before we're 2 grants into it or we're a year down the road. So thank you for making my point, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about these things.
And some of the, we know we're going to need a new water plant or dual water plants. We know that there's an enormous amount of money that can go into stormwater mitigation. And we know that there are several other substantial capital improvement projects, the discussion of the police department being just one of several highly significant. And ultimately, water's pretty darn important, for example. So those big ticket items, certainly as we plan into the future. Good discussion. Any other comments or questions?
Mayor, I'm going to do this tonight, and I'm going to do this on the 12th, and if we continue it past the 12th, I'll do it then too. I want to thank Director Zimmerman and Laura Garcia for their very hard work on both the annual audit and the annual budget process. It's not easy to come into these things midstream and do what they've done, so I really appreciate all the time and effort they've put into this process this year. I feel very good about where the budget is, and it's thanks to their dedication.
Absolutely. You've had a busy first year, and Laura, another busy year. So very, very good stuff to be able to juggle those and do them so well. With that said, we could have a motion to continue this public hearing.
I would make that motion to the board action on November 12th.
I second the motion.
Trustee Brown made the motion to continue the public hearing to November 12th. Trustee Eigel seconded. We can vote on that motion. And this item is continued to November 12th for the second public hearing. Okay, we're on, actually we're back, we have the second public hearing. This one is action item 5, so Resolution 9325, making certain findings of fact regarding the proposed annexation of Riverside Drive townhomes to the town of Estes Park. Again, we'll consider the information presented in the public hearing from the town staff, from the applicant, public comment, and written comments received on the item. Has any trustee had any ex parte communication concerning this application which are not part of the board packet? I see none. Any member of the board may ask questions at any stage, and this public hearing is open. Okay, Kara.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. I'm Kara Washam. I have one item for you today. Probably will be pretty fast. It's regarding the Riverside Drive Townhomes annexation. The owner and applicant is Estes Park Housing Authority. The purpose of this item is to determine if the Riverside Drive Townhomes property is eligible for annexation and make certain findings of fact in accordance with the Municipal Annexation Act and Colorado Constitution. The subject property is 2.6 acres. It's owned by the Housing Authority, and the Housing Authority plans to develop 14 for-sale attainable townhomes that will be sold to the Estes Valley workforce. Here's a vicinity map of the property, and here's a map of the proposed annexation. The annexation process is governed by the Municipal Annexation Act, and it requires 4 steps in the annexation process. So last month, we completed steps 1 and 2 with town board voting to approve resolution 9025, finding substantial compliance. The next step is the eligibility resolution, and that's what we are here for today. The purpose of this hearing is so that town board can determine whether the subject property is eligible for annexation. Step 4 is a public hearing that involves the ordinance for annexation and potentially the ordinance to establish zoning. Right now that date is to be determined, but we're looking at possibly early 2026. To clarify the substantial compliance and eligibility determine whether the parcel can be annexed, this final step determines whether a parcel will be annexed. And of course, that next public hearing is when staff, along with the applicant, will provide a much more detailed presentation, an analysis of the annexation and proposed future development. Town Board's action and authority at this stage of the annexation review is to determine if the territory is eligible for annexation. Staff has completed a review of the annexation application and finds that it meets the criteria, including the following. At least 1/6 of the perimeter of the area proposed to be annexed is contiguous, and a community of interest exists between the area proposed to be annexed and the annexing municipality. And here are some advantages and disadvantages. Finding the application eligible for annexation would be consistent with the requirements of the Colorado Constitution and the Colorado Revised Statutes. There aren't any known disadvantages of determining the property eligible for annexation, nor is there an impact to the town budget. At the time of this writing, no public comments have been received. However, if the annexation proceeds through the process, we expect public interest may increase. And here are some sample motions. I'm here to answer any questions, and then Scott Moulton, Executive Director, is here as well.
Are there any other conditions for approval that were not in the staff report?
No, not for the eligibility annexation.
Do we have any public comment on this item? This eligibility for annexation? I see none. Board members, comments, questions?
I move to approve Resolution 9325.
I'll second that.
I'll also ask the town clerk staff whether any communications have been received in regard to this application which are not in the board packet.
No comments have been received, Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, is there additional discussion after the motion and the second? Yes.
I want to ask, how were public comments sought? Was there any requirement of a signposting? Yep, how were public comments sought?
Trustee Eigel, for the eligibility annexation, it has to be published in the newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks. That started the Friday after our last town board meeting, and I believe it was last Friday was the last of those 4.
Okay.
It also gets sent registered mail to Larimer County clerk, attorney, all the other districts that are involved. So it went to the library district, sanitation district, that sort of thing.
Adjacent property owners, are they notified directly, or it's their responsibility to see those public notices?
I believe it did go out. I'm not entirely sure.
Would
Perhaps
anyone know
Attorney
that?
Kramer has
Yeah.
an answer for that one if that was required.
What was our outreach to the public that, yeah,
Let me look into that. I don't have that on the top of my head.
yep, that's fine.
I don't believe that was a
I think it's an
requirement for that.
important part, especially, boy, zoning and annexation and property use is a hot topic right now. So in this presentation, there's a map, there's a proposed multiple units for workforce housing. We hear that language. So I believe while that might influence our conversation and our decision, I would suggest that those pieces of this conversation have no place at this time. This is a conversation, and this is also for the public to understand that this is a technical review of the logistics of approving the eligibility for annexation. Is that accurate, Attorney Kramer? Or we're just looking at legal details to accept the eligibility of this for annexation, is that correct?
Correct, Trustee Eigel. These are very specific technical requirements for annexations. Unlike our normal review criteria, meeting these technical requirements does not mean that annexation is going to happen. That's a discretionary act that the town board will make later.
My lines are being stolen from this side of the dais repeatedly, which I appreciate because it means I kind of understand what we're talking about. And a lot of times there is a disconnect with the public, understanding that we're just talking about meeting the technical requirements. This is a technical step, which seems very, I understand it, but a lot of people don't have that perspective. It came up when we were talking about a right-of-way, vacating a right-of-way. There was some confusion about what our conversation meant. So this is a technical acceptance of the details, and the maps and the proposed use do not dictate how this property will be used in the future. So I would say that they don't have a place here because they do confuse it a little bit. This is the property owner, the housing authority asking, and the town saying, you meet the requirements. So I'll support it because it's a technical step on the way to a larger conversation.
Trustee Eigel, thank you for that feedback. I flipped back to slide 6 to point out this bullet point under number 4 on there. It reads, once an annexation petition has been found to be both substantially compliant and eligible for annexation, town board may proceed with the annexation zoning proceedings. So what that means is we can't formally start the review process until this step is complete. So for example, the establishment of zoning, it's not a true rezone, but it follows the same process. So adjacent property owners would be notified. It would go to planning commission for a recommendation, then ultimately to town board.
What I'm trying to avoid is the public barrage of concern that the town board tonight has approved an annexation. And it's at a very simple level. It's not accurate, but I'm being a little over the top with, this is a technical step toward that conversation. And, you know, if the drawing and the preliminary layout and the concept wasn't in there, well, I'd have nothing to say there, but I think that it confuses perhaps the conversation, because someone could look at that and say, oh my gosh, look what they approved last night at the meeting, and that is not what we're approving.
So yeah, I just wanted to point out it is just a technical, which I think you've done a great job in explaining and having the slide indicate that same thing. So I guess, yes, we want to make sure the public is taking note correctly, but we have to also put it on them to you know, be listening and reading and understanding and asking questions if they don't understand. This is just a technical piece to the annexation, which we've had one not very long ago, the same thing. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, all reports, statements, exhibits, and written communications presented will be accepted as part of the record. This public hearing is closed, and I believe we already had a motion on the table. Did we have a second? Yeah, Trustee Brown made the motion to approve Resolution 9325. Trustee Youngland seconded. And any other discussion? We can vote. Eligibility approved. Thank you. We will move on to item, we're back to report and discussion items. And I believe Public Information Officer Miller is going to talk to us about the 2025 National Survey results.
Yes, just
How
one
did,
moment.
how did you draw the straw at the end of the meeting? Or the last, well, it's not the last item, somebody
I
else.
don't mind. I can tell you have a lot of energy. It's
Yeah,
going
that
to be a
must
good
be it.
discussion.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
put the most energetic at the end.
Just one moment while I pull this up. Navigating to the survey report through our website to show where we have it posted, both on the homepage and on the community survey landing page. So all of the information is here and accessible to the public, just as it is to us tonight. So what we're looking at is the dashboard that is here for everybody to use. We have a PDF report, static data that's available also on the website, but this is really the interesting way to dig into it. So I'm going to have this on the screen and go through it with you, but I'm going to start by providing some background and context to the survey. This is not necessarily for the board, but for anybody who's not familiar with it and hasn't engaged in this before. So we're closing the loop on the 2025 survey process, and now we can begin putting the data to work for the community. We've had this data, long-running data, for 14 years now, and every 2 years we refresh it and we gather new opinions and sentiments about town services and our community in general. So I'm excited to be here and talk with you about this today. When we engage the residents in our survey, we are asking their opinions on the town services and community in general, as I mentioned. And then we use this information to help us inform town policies, programs, and just generally help us to address the community's current and future needs. The model we use for the survey is the National Community Survey, otherwise called the NCS. It is a ICMA-endorsed survey that is scientifically conducted so that it's statistically valid. It can be used to reflect what we believe our community thinks of certain issues and their perceptions. So I would argue it's one of our most important and reliable sources of data. So I'll set that there, and then I'll tell you a little more about why that is true. It really can't be overstated, the value that it brings to our decision-making in the moment, but also we can look back at the trends and see how our residents feel we've been doing over time. Because we've done the survey since 2011, 7 times now, and because we use a very consistent model with very few changes in the questions, we can really track how we're doing over time. That's a very long tenure for a community to be doing a survey like this. So it's replicating the questions so we can watch those trends is really important and really valuable. And because the model is used across the country by around 300 communities, we are able to look at our results compared to theirs. We can benchmark our results so that we are comparing, say, a rating on one particular service with their rating, with a national average, versus comparing our services internally against each other. That doesn't help anything. So the value of this model is clear in those ways. I think that by conducting this survey biennially, really, it's in your strategic plan that we will do so, but conducting it consistently and for such a long period of time really reflects the town's commitment to hearing from our residents and continuing to ask the questions. It's an important source of information for informing our decisions and your decisions, but it's not the only source of information, right? We have all kinds of qualitative data that we gather from our community, other quantitative data points, counts and rates, and the things that we track internally with our performances. And then there are inputs like laws and mandates. And all of these things go into making decisions for the community. But I want to point out that the value of a survey and what this survey provides that many of those others don't is a way for residents who would otherwise hesitate to get involved to provide their honest opinions. There's no social pressure. Nobody's listening or thinking about, what they might say in a rebuttal. It's convenient. It's right there. They can do it when they want. We have a long survey period. It makes it easier than say, showing up to a community meeting. And it's anonymous. So there's a level of comfort and that ensures us we're getting more broad, comprehensive, and honest feedback from the community. And this is really important, especially when we're looking at contentious or polarizing issues. So it helps to balance out what we're hearing from the community, and I think that's a great value. My goal this evening isn't to dive into the results because that would take us all week, and I run the risk of highlighting something and not something else, and somebody being disappointed that we didn't focus on that. So what I'd like to do is show you around the dashboard and it's a robust tool. It'll help you dig into the areas that you're interested in. The community is certainly going to have the areas they're interested in, different members of the community, different organizations, our partners. It's valuable to so many people, and the dashboard allows you to dive into the data where you are most interested. I can point out some of the highlights of the actual results as we go, but again, that's not really my focus. Nonetheless, just please let me know if you do have a question as we move along.
Can you describe how to get to the results from the Estes.org website,
Sure.
from the homepage?
From the homepage, we have it linked from the Hot Topics. It's here,
Okay.
2025 Community Survey. It takes you to this landing page. And if you go back, we go back 3 years here on the landing page. So you can see these results, including the PDF, and 2023 and 2021.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the report focuses the results, it aggregates the results of the survey into some big topics that factor into the livability of a community. And I'll actually jump right down to this graphic. I think it's a helpful one. Let's see if I can get it. Overcorrection. All right. This graphic right here, these are the facets of community that we can lump all of the data into. So safety, mobility, community design, inclusivity and engagement, health and wellness, the economy, utilities, parks and recreation, our natural environment, and education, arts, and culture. And so you'll see that a lot of the data is aggregated to summarize our results in those areas. All right. I'm having some challenges here, just one moment. All right. So I don't want to spend too much time on the methods of the survey, but this really explains how it's conducted and what makes it a statistically valid survey. There's a lot of information here that you might find interesting if you're into survey science, but I would really like to point out that our response rate in Estes Park is double the national average for response rates. So I think it's another demonstration of the level of engagement in our community. And there's more evidence of that throughout the survey data as well. And I think another thing that's truly impressive to me is due to our sample size and the number of responses, we ultimately heard from about 10% of our population. So that's something to be proud of. The methods tab, again, goes into a lot of detail. I'll move along to the key findings. This is just a static summary of some of the high points of the data. And we often score very high in this area. Residents value Estes Park as a place to live and enjoy a high quality of life. And so some of the things we asked were, how do they feel about Estes as a place to live, the general quality of life, recommending the town to others as a place to live, remaining in the community for at least 5 years, as a place to retire. These are all things that are rated highly by our community. Public safety has consistently been rated highly over the years, and it's nice to see that. What I would point out is this is across the board, public safety high marks, except when it comes to a sense of safety with flood, fire, and other natural disaster. Not difficult to understand that. And given the recency, last year, fire even, as well as what happened 5 years ago, that's going to impact those ratings for a long time to come. So everything we can do to address that and work to increase that sense of safety. And we are doing those things. Parks and Recreation continue to be highly valued. I would like to point out some of these are other agencies' programs like recreation programs and classes and centers, but our parks were highly reviewed by about 9 in 10 participants. But one area we may want to continue to focus is availability of walking paths and trails. And there is more information on the topic of mobility in the survey as well. As always, our natural environment is seen as our strength. We have much higher ratings than national averages in the quality of our overall natural environment and some of those specifics like cleanliness, water resources, air quality. Let's see. Mobility, traffic flow on major streets. This is an interesting one. It increased significantly, positive ratings from 2023. 29% rated it positive, increasing to 49% in 2025. About 2/3 rated the ease of walking positively, but it was a decrease. So that kind of corresponds to what I mentioned just a minute ago. And then there is other information related to public transportation and other modes of transportation that indicate that we need to continue working on that. Street services improved notably, and you'll see a lot of information specific to town services on streets and mobilities later in the survey. The economy and housing affordability remain a challenge. So perceptions of that, we saw a very significant decline in the economic health of the community since 2023. Place to work, employment opportunities are all rated lower than the benchmark. And we're also seeing comments similar to that with shopping and other business services in the community. That goes along with the comment from, or the sentiment from residents that the cost of living is a major challenge. It's not rated highly by many at all, 12%. Community design is something that we can dive into as we're working on certain code projects and other projects. I think that's really interesting. Some notable results about our specific custom questions is that increased investments would be appreciated in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements, adding more curb, gutter, and sidewalks when we work on the streets, and also expanding engagement opportunities for future town project planning. And then the areas of greatest change, some of the greatest, most significant jumps were perception of street repairs, a lot more positive this time, traffic flow on our streets, as I mentioned, and the job we do as a local government welcoming resident involvement. Decreases go back to the economic facet and employment opportunities. And I mentioned safety from fire, flood, and other natural disaster. And the quality of federal government services is an interesting data point, but nothing we can address. See, I'm going to move ahead to the dashboard. This is really the area that I think is the most helpful. You may dive into some of the facets that are aggregated up here in the other tabs at the top. Another way to navigate those is this area here to get a drop down. But the dashboard, I think, is where you might find the most useful. So what this does is it allows you to select a facet, one of those 10 that we talked about. Currently, I've got quality of life selected. And so you can comb through the results in a little bit more detail. Percent positive means it was rated excellent or good by that percentage of respondents. And in the national benchmark, it's either rated as much lower, lower, similar, higher, much higher. So you'll see a lot of these are similar. You can see the breakdowns of all of the responses and more information about where we rank in the national scheme. And then you can get into detail on demographics. So you can compare what different categories within a different demographic group think about a specific question. So we can go to income as an example. And this is going back to quality of life questions. What you might notice as well is sometimes the screen limits the view of your results, and you may end up having to scroll a little bit. So this is one of the instances of that. We can go to housing tenure. You can look through these. I'd like to show you how to get a little further into those comparisons using another tab as well. Any questions about the dashboard so far? Okay. If we want to go to the comparisons tab and look deeper, you can choose the facets that you're interested in, and we'll do governance. And I've got the demographics selected for age, and you can you can pare this down to only the significant values by selecting that, and that really brings the information down to the significant changes that we've seen, or when there is a significant difference between a specific demographic group's perception of one of these items and another group's perception. When you see an A, B, or C in these columns, for example here, this value is significantly different than column C. Same for this one. So the significance is calculated, and it's letting you know this is a pretty big difference between these groups. You can, let's see, we can look at the economy and income. So you can see some pretty big differences here as well. And these are only the factors that show significant differences, meaning if I toggle this to show all of the results, you'll see that there isn't a significant difference in how these income groups view Estes Park as a place to live. Whereas on this business quality, business and service establishment quality, this result here for the income group of $200,000 per year or more is significantly different than all of the other income categories. So just understanding what you're reading, I think, helps, and also being able to refine it down to the really big picture items. And I think it's really important as you're going through the results to not get bogged down in all of the numbers and look for meaning in the data where it may not be there. This is a solid foundation and a basis of understanding for us and our community. And it's a jumping off point for looking for more information on a specific topic. And we do that in many ways with projects, specific projects and issues. But it's important not to try to overanalyze the data. We're looking for the big picture. I think, one of the things you learn about data like this when you're in survey sciences, I'm sure many of you have experienced a class like that, is that you can't torture your data into confessing something it doesn't know. And so I think that I find when we're talking to staff and other individuals who are interested in this, that sometimes we're trying to determine the motivation behind a response or project that response to a larger meaning. So it's really important to step back and use this to understand the big picture of perceptions and sentiment.
Kate, can I ask you, well, first, I know what I'm doing for the next 2 weeks every night. It's going to take a long, I'm not actually.
It's a lot.
But there's a lot of information here, and the way that I appreciate that you went through this and pointed out some of the angles. I have deleted one income group, and I'm not sure how to get it back in my own use of it on the laptop here while you're speaking. But how does this impact, so for you and for Travis, how does this impact decision-making or your perspective of the community? Where does the cost and the time that the town invested in this survey, how does that impact decision-making other than if we spend the next 2 weeks looking at every single detail, but not too much?
Yeah, so the entry point for this is, there's lots of entry points for this. We're trying to get better about referencing this in everyday decisions. But there are a couple of key places. So the strategic planning process is an important place, especially for figuring out what people want us to spend time and money on. Whenever we look at, for example, the 1A sales tax renewal, we come back here and we look at what focus areas people are saying that they want the town to spend money on. Or if we have a vague idea of what we would like to do, we come back and we look at, what do you spend money on? This custom question actually originated back 2015, 2016 as a response to some concerns about fiscal sustainability. So we were actually looking for the range of responses, but especially if we have to decrease services, where should we go first? So that has faded a little bit. It's always good to have that in your pocket. So if we're going back and having to cut to get to budget, this can inform that. But importantly now, we look at where folks are telling us they want increased services, and you'll see in a lot of these areas, I'll call attention to the number one requested increased services, which is affordable housing at 64%. I think it's towards the bottom, Kate.
It is, yes.
There it is. Addressing workforce attainable and affordable housing. 64% of the response to the survey indicated they'd like to see that service increase. And that's reflective. This is with 6E funds. So we know that we're doing a lot of good work here, and it isn't quite yet reflected in people's perceptions of the problem. So I would encourage the board also to take this in and use this data when you're evaluating proposals from staff, budgets from staff. This is a trove of data. I always tell new trustees that there's really only two ways to determine the will of the public in Estes Park. That's through our democratic elections, and that's through a statistically significant survey. You can get a good sense of it from talking to people, to engaging with the community, trustee talks.
But
This
not the
gives you
global
hard
view.
numbers
Right.
from a very large group of people who may or may not have time to engage in other ways. So this is key cornerstone data for us. It is reflected in our performance metrics. And I look for, it's like, I appreciated report cards as a child, and to me, this is our report card for the community. So it tells us
I would
where we need
imagine
to
you did.
focus more attention.
Yeah, thank you.
And it tells us, well, hey, you're doing a good job, but don't slack off here.
So that makes me think of all the reports that we have where you get green. Yes, we get report cards often from you, so this is helpful. This is deep.
And
And you said you weren't going to go too deep, but you could probably go on all night.
I could.
Yeah. there's a
Yes, I
lot of
do want to
information
point
here.
out, you know, Town Administrator Mahalik brought up this particular aspect of our custom question. And at the same time, as he mentioned, there was a significant increase in the perception of the availability of affordable housing options. So people see this is happening and they want us to continue, if not do more. So there's a lot of those things that you can tie together as you look through here.
I have a question. I think I know the answer of, but I want to make sure of it. When this survey was submitted, I presume that the way you did it, you talked about that a little bit, that it would only include survey responses from people who were residents within the town limits. So it didn't ask questions for those in the county that are not in the town, correct?
The sample survey, so the statistically valid survey, which is the data we're looking at here, was sampled from residents within town limits.
Okay.
And we also did the open participation survey where anybody could participate regardless of where they live. And we saw very similar trends and results as well. So we offered that, but this scientific survey is of town residents.
So the supplemental one you did for outside town residents?
For anybody.
Yeah, for anybody.
We
not,
asked.
Not just in the valley.
We
It
asked
could be anybody.
that if they did the scientific survey, we asked that they not do that one.
Okay.
But it was open to anybody. So it was
Well,
self-selection.
and how much response did you get from that open survey? compared
Close to 200, I think. Maybe 194.
Okay, and we had what?
194. We had about 594.
Okay, 594 for the town,
Yeah.
100 and something for the outside the town. But they were similar. I'm particularly interested in if they were similar on the housing questions, since we have citizen-initiated ordinances for voters to consider, and whether that's any indication of, I guess we can't really tell.
We can't,
how
and
they
it
vote.
also doesn't, it doesn't specify where they live.
Right.
And that might be a factor, a limiting factor. So I would stick to using this particular data, and if we ever wanted to go beyond that, we would have to try something different.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else you would like me to cover, Town Administrator Mahalik?
I would encourage the town board to parse this information, and if you would like to discuss any of these items in greater detail, we can. If you have thoughts or ideas about how we can integrate this into town processes to make it more visible for you, we'd be open to that as well. We're always trying to integrate as much of the data that we have into the processes that drive decisions in our organization. So it's a lot of data. You can spend a lot of time with it, and I'm very glad that we have PIO Miller to help us coordinate this every other year and get this out to the community and come present it to the board. So please feel free to reach out to either Kate or I if you have any questions or want to discuss anything further.
Yeah, it's a great wealth of data. I think this smattering and showing us around is very good. I actually will go back out to it, maybe not every night for 2 weeks, but definitely I find it interesting. I would find it very intriguing to see the unincorporated parts of the valley and see what kind of responses. Could even toss in a question about, do you want to be annexed? It'd be interesting sometime if there were ever a potential for doing the whole valley. And On the other hand, you lose some of the anonymity if you try to find out, are you in or outside of town limits? So
And I'm
not quite sure how that would work.
I'm not familiar with what they're currently doing, but Larimer County itself has used this survey, the NCS, in the past. But again, I'm not sure what that includes or if they're currently doing it up in our area. So
Anyway, very good, good stuff. Trustee Youngland.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. I always appreciate when we when the new survey comes out, and it just blows my mind of the information that you can spend hours, just days and hours, I'm sure. So I just really appreciate you facilitating this and bringing it forward, and hopefully demonstrating, to the public how to get on the dashboard and navigate. Hopefully a lot of them are watching and will be able to do that. So thank you.
thank you. And one of our next steps will be to more broadly share this out and promote the dashboard and invite questions. So we typically do that through some broad community outreach, such as a news release and Facebook posts, and then we share it with the intergovernmental managers, the other organization leaders, because it's useful to them as well.
Fun stuff for near the end of the meeting. Although the budget, it's hard for you to top the budget
Yeah.
presentation. So, okay. Anything else? Are we good? You good? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Our last item on report and discussion items and on the agenda is the Visitor Center parking lot design. Town Engineer Whitwer has shown remarkable patience through the evening, and here he is, all alert and ready to go.
Thank
Take
you.
it away.
I appreciate it. So kind of leading off with what Kate just talked about, using data and survey results, we're looking for input from the board tonight on 2 design alternatives. We did put a survey out to the public, and we received about 236 responses, which is way higher than I expected. And I equate that to our typical approach of having an open house or a public meeting. I can't imagine 236 people in a room. So I'm grateful that we got a lot of responses on this. I know the results and the drawings are in your packet. I don't know if you've had time to look over those or not. We did get them added late today. But looking at the results, some of the questions we asked, looking at both design alternatives, we did have about 80% of people that responded are using their vehicle to get to the visitor center. Only 14% are on foot and 1% in transit. And part of that could be right now because we're towards the end of busy season, the peak season, and some of those responses might not have been from a lot of visitors. 84% of the respondents were residents and 25% are employed in Estes Park. So that could be some of the swing in that data. When you look at each option, alternative A, which is the bus pullout on Highway 34, 37% of respondents were opposed to that and 48% were in support. Some of the key issues with that one, a lot of people appreciated that the buses were separated from the parking lot, that it eliminated some of the congestion within the parking lot, having those buses be out on the highway. The farmers market was a very common response, that there was, both options had pros and cons with potential use for the farmers market. Some of the concerns on option A were pushing people further away from the facility, specifically for restroom use. And then waiting time or waiting out in the elements further away from the facility as well. And alternative B, which is the reconfiguration within the parking lot, 64% of people that responded were opposed to that alternative, 21% in support. A lot of the comments on this one were about the amount of parking spaces that were reduced. But I will note that with both options, there are going to be a reduction in parking stalls. So that's inevitable And the numbers outlined in here could swing a little bit as well. So this is high level concept design. Things will change as we move forward and get further details on these designs. So those numbers might adjust up or down. But that's just part of the reality of trying to improve these transit services at this facility. So overall, one of the last questions was to ask people to select one option. 56% selected A, 21% B. Some people said they were equally good, some said I don't know, and 15% said other. So a little bit of background on these options. TAB did review, originally there were 6 concept drawings. These are kind of the final 2 that TAB reviewed and narrowed it down to. And now we're in that public feedback stage. So we're trying to move forward with one of these options so we can get design out before the end of the year and then move into the construction phase next year. So I will point out on alternative A, one of the big comments, biggest concern from an engineering standpoint as well is having those buses conflicting as they pull out into that right turn lane. So that's not a fatal flaw, but there's flaws in both designs. And again, a lot of these things will be ironed out as design moves forward. But with that, I'd open it up to any questions you may have on the concepts themselves or the survey results.
Trustee Young.
Yeah, from a cost perspective, is one more costly than the other? If you can speak to all that, that would be great.
Sure. So at this point, we don't have detailed cost estimates on both, but I did try to pull some rough numbers on both of these on kind of the high ticket items, paving, concrete, grading, the restoration, things like that. They're going to be pretty similar. I think if there's a difference, it might be $100,000 one way or the other, but looking at both of these, I'm confident that we can construct either one of these within the budget that we have through this grant.
And what about disruption to, you know, the existing parking lot, the visitor center, just town in general? Is basically the ease, is there one that would be less disruptive to the town than the other?
It's hard to say. So the limiting factor on construction for Estes Park every year is paving. So depending on contractor means and methods, we could limit this contract or this project to have certain timelines of construction windows. So paving as early as May or as late as October. So we can hit some of those outside of the busy season, but not all of it. So some things might be able to be completed and constructed over the winter months and then conclude in the spring before paid parking starts and everything after Memorial Day. As far as other disruptions, alternative A, the bus pull off on Highway 34 would have impacts to Highway 34, obviously. So a lot of that would be lane shifts, lane closures, while that turn lane is constructed. Some of it might be able to be constructed from within the property or on the, the visitor side, visitor center side, but there will be impacts to Highway 34 with that option.
Thank you.
Trustee Eigel.
A couple of things. I remember a lot of conversation at TAB about this, and it was pretty good conversation that it's like a flashback to the conversation there. Do you foresee any future traffic changes or recommendations to CDOT with either of these to accommodate bus traffic or movement in and out of the visitor center? Is there anything else that you see on the horizon? A change to Steamer and 34? I don't know. Traffic signals? What's coming? What else is coming?
In relation to either of these concepts,
Right.
no.
Does either of these encourage more development that way?
I think that there are going to be improvements to Highway 34 in the future. I don't know what those would look like. You mentioned Steamer Drive as an intersection for improvement. I think we've looked at that in the master transportation plan as possibly being a roundabout in the future. The 34 and 36 intersection is possibly being a roundabout in the future. Signal timing is kind of a separate measure that could be adjusted at any time. But there's a multitude of things that could happen along this stretch. We've got a lot of public input about pedestrian crossing from the visitor center to the north side of the highway. So there's a lot of discussion about those things, but right now we don't have any of those outlined in our 5-year CIP to pursue any of those improvements.
And
on
are those
34.
both state, those are both state intersections that would be, like the state could say, we're doing this project next year, prepare yourselves?
Correct, but they typically have a 10-year plan, so to my knowledge, they don't have any plans to make any of these improvements.
I like the A. I would have to agree with some of the feedback I've gotten, which is separating buses and vehicles and pedestrians, the open space in front of the visitor center versus a bus that's inches away from the door. I think, yeah, these are a good opportunity to move forward, and the public input supports everything that I see positive about that.
I concur with Trustee Eigel's evaluation. I am very interested in pedestrian crossing there. That seems like it's been an ongoing issue that we seem to be kicking down the road without any real solution for it, because you do see people crossing there over to Lower Stanley Village, and it is dangerous for sure. So my question really relates to whether resolving that issue is dependent on which choice, whether it's A or B, whether that would change at all any potential future resolution of the crossing.
Well, I think the reality of if a pedestrian crossing were to go in at this location, there's two options: it'd be an underpass or an overpass. Both are pretty expensive. Underpasses for a 2 or 3 lane road run around $2 million. So to go across 6 lanes, it'd be a pretty expensive, pretty disruptive project. An underpass would potentially have groundwater issues in this location and a lot of utility conflicts as well. Overpasses, then you don't have the ADA accessibility. So those are the two solutions that I see if there were to ever be something in this location.
And do you know of any DOT restrictions on spacing of pedestrian crossings? Because it could well be, I suppose, that the state says you shouldn't have a pedestrian crossing here because it's too close to another one or too far away. That, I don't know.
Yeah,
that might work.
There's a lot of things that are looked at when pedestrian crossings are put in. So recently CDOT's been looking at Highway 7, but typically crosswalks you want to place them at locations that are obvious and are expected to the vehicular user. So mid-block crossings are, from an engineering standpoint and a safety standpoint, generally not preferred.
I prefer.
If it's an area that you have the data to support, there's constantly pedestrians crossing at that location, then that would be a scenario where you could look at installing something.
Okay, and that might be something we could ask the visitor center to figure out how to track somehow, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like a wildlife crossing. Yeah, the deer are going to cross there anyway, might as well give them an overpass. But I think when you get that many in favor of one of the two final options, you've got a pretty good indicator there. Good stuff. Other questions or comments? Do you have anything else for us?
No.
Well, in that case, then, good night, and thank you for the
Trevor,
good
do you want to just give a
information.
quick summary of next steps for the board?
Oh, okay, there you go.
Sure. So we will engage with Kimley Horn, our design consultant, on moving forward with alternative A. So they will move forward with a 30% design, and then, typically we would take that to tab. So I don't know if we'll need any more public outreach. I think we have a lot of the information that we need from this survey. But then 30% will progress to 60% and 90% design, and we're hopeful that that'll be done before the end of the year and we can move into construction. Thank you.
Thanks to all who hung out with us. Officer Michala, thank you for the great security. Accomplished the purpose. Okay, this meeting is adjourned.